California Democratic Congressman Khanna to break this all down. So the president, Congressman, seems to be ignoring the big number on inflation, which is 8.3%, focusing instead on the month-to-month number. Let's play again what he said yesterday.
Well, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
Congressman, is that a message that you're excited to take to voters this fall?
Well, look, I'm not going to deny the obvious. Obviously, inflation is an issue. People are still paying too much for food, for basic products, for their needs. But how do we solve this? How do we make sure that wages rise and prices come down? There's only one way, and that is we have to make more things in America. We have to produce more. We need productivity to go up. And a lot of the president's policies, particularly the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, is about bringing manufacturing back to America and solving supply chains.
I hear you saying it's still an issue, as if this was something that's sort of landed in this administration's lap. Most Americans, when polled, say they hold government spending accountable for this sky-high inflation. So unless we hear the president acknowledge that it's his policies that have gotten us here, how can American voters expect that he's going to fix it?
Well, let's just be honest about what the causes of inflation are. First of all, it was the Fed. The Fed was buying back mortgages for way too long. Larry Summers, other economists have said that. Second, yes, there was government spending, but it was both under President Trump and under President Biden. It was in response to a historic pandemic, $3 trillion spent under President Trump. There was about $2 trillion spent under President Biden. Now we can say, was that all necessary? I believe it was, to get us out of a massive possible recession and to help get us back. The biggest cause, though, has been the supply chain crisis. How can we not make baby formula in America? How are we not able to build masks in America? Why are we supplying all this semiconductors from overseas? Americans have woken up. They realize we've got to make more things here. That's what's going to solve inflation.
So, Congressman, you talk about spending, and even the Fed has said that about 3% of inflation can be accounted for by the massive increases in spending. And now this administration wants to spend billions of dollars more on new plans and social handouts, as well as forgiveness of student loan debt. And it's causing some Democrats who are looking forward to maybe tough races in the midterms to say, you know what, that's an agenda that I don't want to be attached to. Are they right to walk away from that?
Most of the spending that we are passing is productive spending. It's to build semiconductors here, build battery plants here, build solar panels here, not to build it in China.
What about student loan forgiveness? That's got nothing to do with any of that.
Sure,
that could be $1 trillion.
No, that was one study in Wharton School. Most people, Joseph Stiglitz, other economists who've looked at it, put it at around $300 billion over 10 years. So it's
Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget puts it at $1 trillion.
Well, I disagree with those numbers. I think that the economists who looked at it, I think it is around $300 billion over 10 years. That's $30 billion one year. But here's the important point, which people don't say. That money was not being repaid. Those student loans were in default largely. And what this does is it says those people's credit shouldn't be destroyed, and we'll forgive it so that their credit isn't affected. We can discuss the morality of it, but it simply is not inflationary. And most economists who have looked at it, even those who say it's inflationary, say it's 0.1%. It is not the dramatic inflation that people say it is on the economics.
All right, well, this is the reality that most Americans are living through right now. Not only do they look at that broad number, 8.3%, but the things that matter the most: gasoline up 25%, electricity up 15%, groceries up 13%, car prices up 10%, just to put a roof over your head. Prices are up 6.2% for shelter. Just to put a roof over your head. Prices are up 6.2% for shelter. Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck, 60% of the population. It's a record high. Just to make up for that inflationary cost that's hitting them every month, more Americans than ever are working 2 full-time jobs, 440,000 as of August. That's more Americans than ever working 2 full-time jobs to pay for this inflation. The president just took a victory lap on this Inflation Reduction Act that you support. So by your calculations, how much are these prices going to come down? Take the headline inflation rate. How much is that massive amount of spending during inflationary times? How much is it going to bring down prices?
It's going to bring down prices, but not
How much?
Immediately. I mean, I'm going to be candid about it. It's going to save $200 to $300 on energy costs for people, especially as they go get new heat pumps and as they go electric stoves. It's going to bring down some of the Medicare costs for prescription drugs. But here's what we need to do. You said car prices are up. Why? Because we're not making enough semiconductor chips here. You said gas prices are up. Why is big oil paying a windfall profits tax in Europe? They're proud and fine to pay it. Shell is saying we're fine to pay it to help Europeans, and yet they're fleecing the American public. We're basically paying so that these big oil companies can pay the windfall tax in Europe.
To put a button on this, I asked you a question. You've thrown your support. You've read through this. You're supporting it.
Yes.
By how much will it bring down that headline inflation rate that is now 8.3%, and when?
Well, I think it'll bring it down a bit, but I don't think that the biggest reason I supported it is because it's going to allow us to make more things in America: solar, batteries, wind energy, electric vehicles instead of China. I don't think that the ultimate source of inflation is going to be this act that'll bring it down. I think it's going to be Fed policy.
It's called the Inflation Reduction Act. So what's a bit? That's fine. You said a bit, but just quantify that for us.
Well, look, I think anyone who's trying to predict the economy, that would be foolish. I think where it will bring down prices is on prescription drug, is on energy prices, and long term, it's going to have a deflationary impact by making more things in America. But short term, if you want to tackle inflation, that's largely Fed policy. I mean, that's common economics, that it's driven by monetary policy. And second, we have to go after these high prices. I mean, you want to go after gas prices. Why is it that no one is saying that big oil is making these profits? In Europe, they're paying a windfall profits tax, but here they get to fleece the American public without any rebate or share back to the consumers.
By definition, economists do forecasting. Well, many of them do. There are some notable ones at the White House who don't. By the way, it's not just the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget that pegs the cost of the student loan forgiveness at $1 trillion. It's also Penn Wharton. And last time I checked, they're pretty well respected. Let me just.
Well, but the person who did that was a Bush appointee. I mean, I'm not downing it, but he has a political motive. I trust Joseph Stiglitz, who won the Nobel Prize, and he puts it at $300 billion and $30 billion each year. Look, I think it's a fair debate whether we should forgive student loans or not. I took out $100,000 a loan. I paid them back. I believe they should be forgiven. I understand why people are on the other side. I just don't think pointing to that in the inflation context, it makes economic sense. We can have a moral debate about whether it's the right policy.
All right, let me move on because I want to talk about the border. This is what your colleague Kamala Harris said a week ago and what some of your other Democratic colleagues have said in the time since. Listen here.
The border is secure.
It's wrong. She's dead wrong on that. Does anybody say that our borders are secured? That is not accurate. I've been there.
The border's not secure, without due respect to the VP. We get thousands of people along the border, from 6,000 to 8,000 people a day.
So I know you didn't have the benefit of seeing the monitor, but that was Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Henry Cuellar of Texas, whose district includes El Paso, which is literally drowning in illegal migrants. Where do you come down on what Kamala Harris said? You're from a border state. Is the border secure?
I recognize their voices, Senator Manchin and Representative Cuellar. Look, I think we can do more to secure the border, but what that looks like is comprehensive immigration reform. It's secure, but we can make it securer. I mean,
I'm sorry, Congressman. How is it secure when 2.35 million people by the 31st of this month will have come across the border illegally?
Well, there are more border agents down there, in my view, by the numbers than were even there under President Obama or President Bush. So, but why is it not secure? Let's have an honest conversation. One of the reasons is you have employers here saying, come work for us. People are trying to come across the border. They're coming without the paperwork, and many of them want to go back, but there's no process. And this is why we had a gang of eight. We had comprehensive immigration reform. We said people who want to come here to work and go back, there should be a process. That was President George W. Bush's proposal, and we can have increased technology and security at the border. There was a bipartisan deal. If we really want to solve the problem, why not do that? And there are many of us who are willing to work to do that instead of just yelling at each other, which doesn't solve the problem, and it gets worse and worse every year.
Tom Homan was on last hour, basically asking a question: where is Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, she was appointed the border czar. We haven't seen her at the border. We haven't seen a whole lot of communications on the border. And she's giving interviews, most recently last weekend, saying that the border is secure. You've got this major influx of migrants pouring over our border to the point where you've got governors of American states trying to figure out what to do with them.
Well, first of all, what they did to migrants, whatever your view on the border and shipping them somewhere, I just think that was wrong. And I hope people can agree that that's wrong. Regardless, look, we're a nation that believes every person is endowed by their creator with dignity. And whatever you think on the border, we ought to treat every person with some dignity. I just think that's who we are as Americans. And what I disagreed with Governor DeSantis by doing that is forget the border dispute. Just treat people with dignity when they're in America, whether they stay in America or not. But I agree that we have a challenge at the border. And the challenge is hurting those of us who care about a humanitarian policy.
But the question was Kamala Harris. Do you think she's doing a good job with the border?
I think we need a better solution on comprehensive immigration reform. And so what I would say to the vice president is help lead to get comprehensive immigration reform done. There is a framework that President George W. Bush did. He was a border state governor. He had a proposal back in the early 2000s. I think if we could just do that, and by the way, the House has passed a proposal that would allow people to come here as guest workers and then go back. It's not even path to citizenship. Why can't we at least do things like that that would reduce the tension? You know, I understand the ranchers on the border. I understand people are coming over. They're destroying the property. In many cases, they're unsafe. I'm sympathetic to that. I understand that. That has to be fixed. At the same time, many of these ranchers want people to hire. So how do we fix this? Well, there's a guest worker program that would solve a lot of it. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't a Democratic idea. It was a Republican president, President George W. Bush. I'm saying let's just pass that and we can take a step forward.
Congressman, I want to move on to the 2024 election, but just one final button that if we could put on this very quickly.
Sure.
So maybe he's not sending them to Martha's Vineyard, and that was obviously an attention-getting act on the part of Ron DeSantis. But Oscar Leeser, who is the Democratic mayor of El Paso, is busing illegal migrants to New York City saying, we're full, we can't handle this anymore, and yet nobody is saying anything in criticism to that. But they're criticizing DeSantis, they're criticizing Ducey, they're criticizing Abbott.
Well, I think what was criticizing DeSantis was it looked like there was trying to make a political point out of it, and there are many other ways he can make. And there are very many other ways he can make a political point. I just don't think you should do it at the expense of people who are vulnerable. Even Republicans, even people on the right who disagree with my policies on the border don't believe that you should be manipulating people. But I agree that it's a problem. We have to solve it, and the way to do it is comprehensive immigration reform.
Okay, so on to 2024. President Biden said yesterday he's not sure whether he's going to run for re-election in 2024. Would you encourage him to?
He has to make that decision, but I believe that he is convinced that he is the best person to beat Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. Every poll I've said shows that he still has a tremendous amount of support, especially among working class Republicans. And so then the question is, who can beat Donald Trump on our side? President Biden has beaten him once. He has the right to make that determination. I believe he is going to run, but it's his decision to make if he still is the best person to beat him.
All right. Well, he's raising some eyebrows with some of the things he said in this brand new interview over the weekend, 60 Minutes. This specifically on the pandemic. Interesting timing. Listen.
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
So are those in his party, all of them, going to get the memo? Are they going to end the mandates and the restrictions that are still happening in many states?
I think what the president was trying to say is that the worst of the pandemic is over. Look, when you give a lot of interviews and every word is dissected, as I know, probably my Twitter feed after this will have
a lot of interviews might be a stretch, considering we haven't seen the president sit down for an interview.
He gave one.
He's out there, but look, obviously there's still long COVID. There's still people who are vulnerable, who have issues. I just got my booster shot for Omicron. I don't think we can be complacent about it, but what he was trying to say is life is largely returned to normal.
No, he said the pandemic is over.
That was pretty
But
unequivocal.
the way I would phrase it is that the worst of the pandemic is over. That's how I would phrase it, and that is my view of what the president's intention was. Obviously, he's entitled to his expression, but I think they've done a tremendous job to get a lot of people vaccinated. And why can't we come together in this country? Why can't we just say, look, President Trump and his team helped develop some of those vaccines, and President Biden helped distribute them, and this is actually a success of America, and let's put the partisan politics aside and give credit to people on both administrations who helped develop the vaccines.
I think it's a fair question.
Wouldn't that be nice?
And wouldn't that be nice? And do you think that this president has followed through on his promise to best effort unite this country?
We're trying. Look, I forget the blame for a second. I am concerned about China in the 21st century. I'm concerned as a son of immigrants. My parents came here and they said, Ro, you were born an American. You won the lottery. This is the greatest country in the world. And I want to make sure for my kids and for the future, we are the greatest country. And putting aside politics, I really think whatever we can do to come on, that's why I get criticized for coming on Fox News. And I say, well, how are we going to start to talk to each other? And so do I think we can do more to bring this country together? Of course. But we all have to start trying.
Well, we appreciate the fact that you and your colleague Debbie Dingell are willing to weather the slings and arrows from your own party to join us on
From
Fox.
Scary
We do
Us.
appreciate it.
I appreciate your letting me on.
It's a good
it.
note to end on. We do appreciate you joining us, Congressman. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see you
Thank
again
you.
soon. All right.
All right.
Thank you.